Hi friends, my name is KyAnn and I want to share with you all a highly requested video about my sourdough starter today. I'm going to share how I made my sourdough starter. I'm going to talk about how I feed it, when I feed it, what I do overall to keep it going strong and active, and I'll be sharing my favorite recipes that I use on repeat as well. I'll give you guys a look into what my weekly routine is as far as sourdough, what it requires, and how I make it simple to always have fresh bread on hand, and what I do with the discard. Basically, a beginner's guide to sourdough the low stress way. I know sourdough can be so overwhelming and intimidating to start, and it truly doesn't need to be, so I want to give you a quick overview of everything sourdough 101 for a beginner and how it works for our family. But first, let me just tell you why I started doing sourdough, when I started it, that kind of thing. My husband, Matt, has had various different health issues for years and years, like since he was a child, a young child, and they could never really get it fully figured out. He had lots of tests, he would go get all of this stuff done, and they could never narrow in on exactly what the issue was. But he had symptoms that made him really pretty miserable and consistently showed up very regularly, pretty much every day for years and years and years. And several years back, we started going down the road yet again of looking into solutions, causes, all of those kind of things. And we discovered a few different things, but primarily we found out that he needed to go gluten-free. Enter sourdough. So we did that. We cut out all the gluten in our home and elsewhere, and we focused very seriously on making sure that he didn't consume any gluten. And for the first few months, we went the route of just buying gluten-free products at the store, obviously checking all the labels for ingredients to make sure it didn't have gluten, that kind of thing. This was almost 2 years ago now, and at that point, we weren't cooking everything from scratch yet, and we weren't immersed in that lifestyle like we are now. And sourdough was sort of the gateway to homesteading and simple living and cooking from scratch, all of that for us, honestly. It was the gateway. That's what started us into this journey. I've shared that before in some of the videos that shared the beginning of our homesteading journey, but sourdough was the beginning for us. And a few months after we went gluten-free, or rather Matt went gluten-free, we don't have gluten in any of our meals or anything like that at home, but I will still eat gluten when I'm at other people's houses or eating out or whatever. We just make sure that Matt has gluten-free choices still in those situations. We realized it was really starting to add up, the expenses of all the various gluten-free products, like a loaf of bread that's tiny, by the way. It's smaller than the average size bread loaf, and it's, 5 times as expensive. It's ridiculous. But I had been wanting to try sourdough, but it was understandably pretty intimidated by it because everyone makes it look just so intimidating. So I had never actually jumped in and done it. Figured I didn't have the time and it was just too much for me to do in this season. So Matt going gluten-free was really kind of the push that I needed to just go for it and see if it would work out for us. I had heard that lots of gluten-free people are actually able to consume sourdough as long as they aren't celiac or something like that. That's a whole different ballgame, but Matt is personally not, so we knew it was safe for him to at least try and see if it would work for him. So we talked about it and decided to give it a go. After a few months of him being gluten-free, he was game to try it and just see if it would work. So we started with just a regular sourdough with regular flour. And by the way, side note, going gluten-free has changed everything as far as Matt's health and symptoms. Very, very quickly, we saw a huge improvement, which was such an answer to prayer, and we knew we needed to stay gluten-free for the long term. He's able to cheat on things at this point, a couple years later, but we were super strict about it in the beginning, and if he even accidentally ate gluten, he would flare up with symptoms really bad, and it was not good. Now that he's been off it for so long, he can actually cheat and decide to have a treat or something like that. And we know the supplements that can help with the symptoms he does still have. So we made the switch very quickly to making all of our bread products with sourdough and not buying store-bought bread anymore. That saved us a ton of money, and I really enjoy the process of making homemade bread for our family. It's delicious, and it was just a win in all the areas. The first year we didn't buy any bread products whatsoever, only sourdough. Now we have a couple gluten-free bread products that we have bought this year, mostly in the season of having a newborn when we were running short on time or didn't plan ahead enough, but it's only been 2 or 3 times in the entire year, and we're still making like, I don't know, 98% or something like that of our bread products at home. Also, random side note, Payson has been loving the back carry recently, and she was getting fussy. So I put her in the carrier really quick, which is honestly pretty much where she is when I'm doing sourdough 90% of the time. So definitely not uncommon. I feel like with the third baby, you wear them, I don't know, I just feel like each kid you wear a little bit more, honestly. And so she gets worn quite a bit. Always done a lot of baby wearing with my kids. I'm sure you guys have heard me talk about it in other videos, but I never attempted the back carry with Camden, my oldest. It just seemed too intimidating, and our second was just a lot more fussy and needed more attention and cuddle time. So since I was wearing him so much more, maybe also because our first two are only 16 months apart, so how on earth was I going to get anything done otherwise if I didn't wear one of them, you know? Like, you gotta have your hands free for something, and two babies that close, it's a whole new ball game. But anyways, I went for it. I figured out how to do the back carry with Knox, and I loved it. So Payson is now old enough that I can wear her on my back. I think I mentioned this in another video recently, and it's just been a game changer, like having her hands out of the way so she can't grab anything. When I wear her front facing, like not facing into my chest but facing out, which is how she likes to do it because she likes to watch everything, but then her hands are out and she can reach around and she's like grabbing everything at this point. So this is really like the best of both worlds. She can still like see what's going on when she's on my back. She can still cuddle up and take a comfy nap. She can't grab anything dangerous, since most of the time I feel like I'm in the kitchen a lot when she wants to be worn, and obviously there's hot things and knives and just all the things like that that are just scary when you have a baby trying to grab everything. So this just makes my life so much easier. I'm kind of a baby wearing addict, so I actually have 3 different types of wraps, slings, carriers, and I've had the same 3 the entire time I've been a mom because they really just do the trick for me. I don't know, they're awesome. So I wear them for different things, but they literally all get so much use just depending on the situation. I'll pick out, you know, which one I need to use based on what I'm doing and, you know, kind of what my mood is, which is really nice to have that option. But I'll link all of the links for the slings down below so that you guys can have that really easy access, because I do have coupon codes for them. And, you know, mama's got to help other mamas bake more sourdough while holding your babies, you know? Okay, resume the sourdough content. I am not going to get into all the specifics in this video because there's a lot of information out there that you can find pretty easily, but sourdough is not only cheaper than at least, you know, gluten-free bread. Obviously regular bread, especially if it's just general old regular bread, pretty cheap, but gluten-free bread, not so much. But also it is way more nutritious than honestly any bread you can buy, at least at a typical grocery store. You get to control the ingredients that go in it, but it's so good for your gut health. It has so many probiotics and nutritious benefits for your body. Modern day bread, if you start looking into it, it's pretty sad to realize that modern day bread in grocery stores is actually lacking like pretty much any nutritious benefit as a food. So the fact that we can make bread at home that is not just empty carbs but is actually fueling our body well with so much nutrition and probiotics and gut health, I just think it's crazy cool. P.S. And I'm saying P.S. in a video. Yes, it's fine. I know it doesn't need to be said, but I'm going to say it anyway. If you are not in a place that you can or want to make sourdough yourself, please don't take any guilt from this video. We all have our own priorities and different things that we're able to prioritize in certain seasons, and food is just one of those things that we've grown very passionate about personally, what we're fueling our bodies with and the ingredients that are in them. It doesn't make you any better of a human to make and eat sourdough at home. Let's just realize that. But if that's a priority to you, there are definitely numerous benefits, both nutritionally and just for your own enjoyment. Probably no one is watching this that isn't at least somewhat interested in sourdough. I'm guessing they clicked off by now if they weren't interested, but I just wanted to take a minute to say that because frankly, there's just way too much information, comparison, and guilt-inducing content out there. And I just want you to know that you can take what you want from this channel and leave the rest. No guilt necessary. All right, moving on. So now to get into the general maintenance of my sourdough starter and how I started mine. Basically, there are 2 ways to start your starter. You can either start your own starter, like literally from scratch, or you can get a starter from a friend. I went the route of starting my own from scratch because I didn't know anybody that had a starter at that time. So, easy choice. It honestly was not as hard as I thought to make a starter. You have to feed it like every 12 hours for about 7 days or so, and it's just flour and water, and I don't know, you have to watch it pretty closely. It was not as big of a deal as a lot of people make it. However, I would definitely recommend just getting it from a friend if you have a friend that has it available. I've given mine out to lots of friends at this point that I've wanted to get started with sourdough. Super easy. I can just give them a little bit in a container and they can take it home and feed it once and it's like ready to go, which is awesome. It's a little bit quicker of a process and not quite as intimidating. So if you have a friend, I would go that way, or you could even like post on Facebook, because I probably did know people like in my community that were doing sourdough. It just wasn't any of my close friends or family. So I probably could have posted on Facebook and found someone, but that's always an option too if you want to find someone that already has an established sourdough. Plus there's some people that have sourdoughs starters that have been going for a long time, and I think the history of that is really neat. But anyways, so that's how I started mine. I did the whole route of just starting it from scratch. If you actually are wanting to start yours from scratch, I would recommend Farmhouse on Boone has a whole blog post on it. I will link that below so you can check that out. That's what I followed, and it worked great. I didn't have any issues with it. As far as general maintenance, I feed mine several times a week. I would say on average every other day. Technically, it is recommended to feed your starter every day if it's sitting out at room temperature to keep it active and strong. And you can put your starter in the fridge if you don't need to use it that day or for a few days or even a few weeks, and that will essentially pause it. I've heard you can keep it in the fridge for up to a month or longer without feeding it and then pull it out. It may take a feeding or two to get it super active again, but it should be totally fine. And I've done this for at least a month, a couple times during super busy seasons or when I was super sick in pregnancy and I wasn't baking sourdough regularly, and I haven't had any issues with it. Regularly, I keep mine out on the counter pretty much constantly just because I use it often enough that it's easier. If for some reason I know like I'm going out of town or something, then I'll put it in the fridge. But aside from that, it's pretty much always out for me. And I'll typically feed it, like I said, about every other day. I'll feed it in the evening before I plan to use it for a recipe, and then I'll go ahead and use it in that recipe the next day. Usually then I let it sit out for a day and then I start over the next day. So that's kind of an average of what happens in our house. I haven't had any issues with it getting less active by doing it that way. If there is a little hooch, which is like a clear liquid that develops on the top of the sourdough starter, and that's just from it not being fed regularly, it's just a sign that it's hungry, you can just stir that right in and keep using it. There's no problems there. The only problem that you would need to like start your sourdough over with is if there is mold or something like that growing on it. Obviously then you would have to start it over from scratch, but I haven't ever had mold grow. I don't know. I will say you might fail a few times, so if you want to dehydrate some of it and put it in the freezer, you can Google how to do that. Or you can also, if you have friends that have sourdough, you can just start it over with that. Like one of my best friends, we traded back. I gave her my sourdough starter when she started, and then we've traded it back and forth a couple times because honestly, I've cooked my sourdough starter before. I left it on the oven and turned the oven on and cooked the outside of it. So that was unfortunate, but you know, it's okay. You just move right along. Failures are a part of life, and it is no reason to give up. You can keep going. It's okay if you completely fail. You can start over. It is not as hard as people make it sound, and it is not the end of the world if you fail. You just get up and you try again, and it's no big deal. We'll get into my weekly routine and my favorite recipes that we use regularly next, but I do want to mention that I never throw sourdough starter away. If I have too much and I don't need it all for a recipe, I have a Tupperware container that I keep in the fridge, and I just keep any sourdough discard that I don't need in that until I want to make a recipe that calls for sourdough discard. A lot of muffin recipes can use sourdough discard. We use it for our instant pizza crust that we do every week. Tons of things. If you look up sourdough discard recipes on Pinterest, you'll find so many options. Pizza crust and muffins are my go-to to use it up, but if I want to try something new, I'll just look up discard recipes and find one I like to try, and I never waste that discard because it's totally useful and no sense throwing it away. I also will use sourdough discard occasionally, not all the time, but occasionally I will mix it with water, and I will actually take it out to our goats and chickens in our little backyard homestead. They love that. There's a lot of nutritious benefits for them as well, and it actually helps their gut bacteria as well. So anyways, awesome for your animals as well if you happen to have those and you need to get rid of some sourdough discard. They love it. They always eat it up super fast, so that's an option too. As far as my weekly routine, maybe it would be fun to do a video on a week in the life of my sourdough starter sometime to really like practically show you what I regularly make with my starter, but comment down below if you think that I should do a video like that, because I think that would be really fun. One of the big things to me about starting sourdough was that I really wanted to not only make bread products with it, but also be able to use it for various meals to make meal planning easier. Stick with me. To basically have it as an additional low stress option to add to my tool belt for making cooking from scratch, real food meals in a pinch easier. Farmhouse on Boone talks a lot about this on her channel, and she is who originally inspired me that this was possible. You can use starter obviously for all kinds of bread products, muffins, cookies, anything like that. But we also regularly incorporate it in meals in so many other ways. Having an instant pizza crust option that we can just slap sauce, cheese, and toppings on and it's ready to go. Having starter for last minute pancakes for breakfast, for dinner if we need a meal in a pinch. Using it as a sourdough skillet with meat, veggies, and whatever else you have on hand thrown together. Really quick Dutch baby for a fun breakfast. There's literally so many options. And as long as you keep some sourdough discard as you have it in the fridge on hand and keep your starter active, this is why I tend to feed mine every other day, even if I'm not necessarily planning on baking something that often. That way I have active starter available if I want to use it for a last minute meal. And if not, I can just discard it and have it on hand in the fridge for the future. So you have 15 to 30 minute meal options available with whatever ingredients you have on hand with any of those recipes. So this was the big key to me. If I was going to take the time to invest in this, keep it alive, focus on keeping another thing still functioning and alive in a very busy household with lots of tiny humans and animals that also need to be kept alive and well, I wanted it to replace all of our bread products with a better option and equip me for even more easy last minute meal ideas when I wanted a quick meal in a pinch. Like, I didn't want it to just be bread, you know? And not just for lack of planning. It is that, and it has been. It saved me many times when we don't like plan ahead or something comes up, things like that. But a lot of the things I mentioned, like pizza or pancakes, etc., it's not just in the times that we, you know, don't plan or we need a last minute thing. We actually plan those out as low cost meals in our weekly rotation, like every single week. So they aren't just last minute options, they're planned easy meals very often, and it's a huge part of our personal meal planning process. So it works really well for us. I will link all the recipes I mentioned down below, but I'll go ahead and say that Farmhouse on Boone, Lisa is her name, Lisa from Farmhouse on Boone, is my go-to sourdough recipe girl. If I want to try something new, I pretty much always try Farmhouse on Boone recipe first. So most of these recipes, if not all, are her recipes, and they are amazing. She just has her process nailed down. She's used sourdough regularly for like 12 years now or something like that, and she knows what she's doing. She's similar. She does all the bread products and all the things like that, but she also just incorporates it into her meal plan and uses it as a part of her meal planning process, and that's what originally inspired me so much to do it that way. Some of our favorite recipes that we use over and over again are no-knead sourdough bread for artisan loaves, or we just throw it in a loaf pan. If we don't need it to be fancy and pretty, we'll just throw it in a loaf pan and use it as sandwich bread. We use sub rolls, have been our recent favorite for bread for sandwiches or whatever. Cinnamon rolls, regular dinner rolls, pizza crust, both the instant option that literally you just have to have sourdough discard and you throw it in a cast iron. I've showed this before on my channel. I can link the video down below where I show that, but it's literally like it's instantly available and you can have pizza crust. You don't have to mix it all together. You don't have to do anything. It's just straight sourdough discard is the pizza crust, and it's amazing. And then we also occasionally do a longer fermented thicker crust option recipe as well, because the instant pizza crust thing with the sourdough discard is a thin crust. But anyways, we do breadsticks, and then biscuits, bagels, and muffins are in the rotation for breakfast options, but not quite as frequently as those other things that I mentioned. So those are our most commonly used sourdough recipes. I also, because I love the benefits of sourdough, and I also love how affordable it is for us, since I don't have to go buy gluten-free flour for our starter, since it ferments and really breaks it down, and Matt can tolerate it at that point as long as it's long fermented. I will Google recipes for whatever baked item I'm making, like muffins, cookies, breads, buns, even things like chicken pot pie or things like that. Anything that would work with sourdough, I'll just look up specific sourdough recipes for that item and use that instead of just a regular recipe with like yeast or whatever. Even things that you would think are kind of strange, just because I want the extra like probiotic and nutritional benefits, and it being long fermented and all of those things. I really enjoy that being a part of our diet, and so I'll just try to make as many things possible as I can. At this point, almost all of the baked items I make are sourdough. There are a few things that I make with regular like gluten-free flour, but most, like I would say 90% of the baked things that I make are sourdough at this point. And by the way, if you didn't know, not all sourdough things have that tangy, typical sourdough taste. The muffins and many other recipes, they just taste like normal muffins. They just have the added benefit of awesome probiotics and nutritional benefits, and being tolerable to Matt being gluten-free. As far as keeping bread going regularly, I plan to make a double batch of either the no-knead sourdough bread that I do in the artisan loaf or the loaf pan, or like the sub rolls that we've been doing recently. Whatever bread we're currently enjoying for sandwiches, we kind of switch it up. We like to have like one bread, and it could be it could be an artisan loaf, it could be sub rolls, it could be like brioche, it could be whatever, but we use that in a variety of ways. So we'll use that for sandwiches, we'll use that with like butter and jam for snacks, all of those kind of things. So whatever I'm making for our main bread thing that we have in the house for the week, I make that every Sunday. So I get it started Sunday evening, and then I actually shape it the next morning and then bake it that next afternoon, so that we have bread available for lunches, snacks, anything we might need. And depending on the week, I may run out early, especially if I have a meal that actually requires the bread to be used for that. Like most of the things I just mentioned are very multi-purpose for us, so we'll use them as bread for sandwiches. We'll also use them for snacks with butter and jam. We'll cut them up to make little garlic bread bites, lots of different things like that, which makes it so much more versatile. And if we have a meal that needs it, like breakfast sandwiches or something like that, we may run out of the bread early. So I'll just make a new batch as soon as I bake the second half of that recipe. So I use recipes that either include 2 loaves in the recipe, or I double the recipe if it only includes 1 loaf. Like with the sub rolls, it only includes, 1 set of the sub rolls, and so I just double that. And then I can keep half in the fridge after I shape it and it rises and all those things. I just keep it in the fridge until I'm ready to bake it. And as soon as I bake that second one, I go ahead and start the next batch. So by the time we eat through that, we'll have more fresh bread so we don't run out. That rhythm helps keep us consistently having bread available so we don't have to run to the store because we don't have any. Obviously, occasionally things come up or I'm not able to start the bread in the right timing for some reason, and that's totally fine. But I try to keep it so it's available the majority of the time so we don't run into issues not having any bread ready. I also plan in my meal planning each week. I plan out if I need any extra sourdough products aside from like our main bread, like I mentioned, for the week that we always have on hand. If I need buns to go with a meal or breadsticks or long fermented pizza crust or anything like that, I note that on my meal plan so I know when I need to prep it. And a lot of the hard part with sourdough is getting used to the timing of it. That takes some time to figure out, like, okay, I want to do this recipe, I want to have it ready at this time, so when do I need to feed it? When do I start it? Like all the timing takes a little bit, and honestly my best advice for that is to just start experimenting, and ideally start experimenting when you don't need it for a certain time. Like I would start with things like the artisan loaf. You can just throw it in a loaf pan if you don't want it to be fancy, but something like the no-knead sourdough bread, which is what I'm calling the artisan loaf, when you're just making that for your family, when you don't have to take it anywhere, just start that at home, and you can get used to the timing after you do it for a few times, and you'll start to get the hang of it before you commit to taking like a sourdough item to, I don't know, a potluck or a family dinner or something where it has to be done at a certain time, because it does take a little bit to kind of figure out the timing of all of that and plan ahead for it. Also, as I'm editing this, I realized that I forgot to mention that no, I am not currently pregnant, as you might think from these clips right here. These last few clips I actually originally filmed because I planned to post this video early this year, just a couple weeks before Payson was born, and it didn't end up happening, and I didn't get all the footage that I needed, but I still had these clips, so I wanted to include them in this video because I had originally planned to use them for this, and no, I'm not currently pregnant. Thank you so much for watching this video. Obviously, I love all things sourdough, and it has become a very regular part of our life. We really enjoy it. We have lots of rhythms that just include sourdough in the kitchen because it's a big part of our kitchen right now, and we've loved it for a few years now and definitely plan to keep using it. So I would love to do more videos in the future on sourdough if that's something you would be interested in, or seeing more cooking from scratch content. Just comment below so that I can plan out some more videos like that. I would love to share that. And thank you for watching this video. I hope it was encouraging in some way. If you're new around here, I share lots of content around motherhood, daily rhythms for intentional, slow living, cooking from scratch, backyard homesteading, all of that kind of thing. So if you like that kind of content, I would love for you to subscribe and join our YouTube family. I'm so excited and grateful for the growth of this channel. It truly is such a fun, creative outlet for me, and I genuinely enjoy talking to all of you that comment and getting to know you. So please leave a comment and say hello and introduce yourself if you're new around here, because I would love to say hi back. So thanks again for watching this video. If you're not new around here, thank you as always for being here, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Bye, friends.